How's it going, you beautiful people? This is Aaron the Pedantic. It is Sunday, and I don't remember the date, so I'm not going to go that far. But I wanted to talk about something that has been weighing on my head for a bit of time now because I just I feel like I've said dumb things regarding this topic, and I think that it's time for me to fix that. So the topic is basically, can a diversity of play styles at the table mesh well? And there have been times in the past that I've basically said that maybe it's better to try and get people that are kind of all on the same page about play style all together and, try and keep the people that are not in the right play style for your game out. And while I think that it's a good idea to make sure everybody's on the same page about how you're going to be playing and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that it's necessarily required to do that in such a formal, restrictive way. Um, I have had some bad experiences, and that's probably one of the reasons why this topic is interesting to me, both as a player and as a DM. Basically, what has happened before in the past is things have gone too far in one direction that was undesirable, either for me as a player or something that I noticed for someone else as a player or something that I noticed for someone else as a DM. I'll give you a few examples. So I've often cited the game that I signed up for, those play by post, and I started playing, and we were having a good time, and then it ended up being basically a romance game. There was just a whole lot of people talking, flirting with each other, with their characters, and I don't mean player to DM, but just player to player. And that wasn't what I signed up for. I'm a married guy. I really haven't been able to separate 100% that kind of stuff. I just kind of feel like it ends up like you're flirting with the other person to a degree. If you're treating it seriously, that's how I feel about it. I know that that's not the case necessarily, and other people have, elevated themselves beyond that. Perhaps I haven't. So it's really not something I'm interested in. And whenever the game was dominated by that particular facet of play, it made the game very undesirable for me. I still tried to hang on, and then I ended up getting booted because they said that they felt like I wasn't invested. Probably because I wasn't trying to mac on anybody with my old dwarf. I'm just kidding. So then another thing was plot-driven games. Whenever I've been a part of plot-driven games, I've often just felt that I am just on the ride, basically. I'm not really determining anything that's going to be terribly important. There are times when this will work in spite of it. My wife has run some games that are fairly plot driven, but the thing about the way she runs things is if you veer off course, and she'll let you, and she'll give you avenues to veer off course. She just runs with it. She runs with it very well, and she gives you some very, very, very major things to decide for how things are going to transpire. Not just simply how do you succeed, but do you do something like what this is a huge branching moral path here. Which one do you take? And I think that that is something that I've been able to hold on to. Whereas in situations that it seems like, well, no, it's you're going to go along this path no matter what. It's just a matter of, little minor details are going to be tweaked and things like that. Those things have just really worn me down. Another thing that has really worn me down when I've been a player is being in a game that's primarily social. I can handle a session or two that is primarily social. I can handle us doing, court intrigue and stuff like that, or just trying to handle things like that. But whenever that's the game is primarily social. We're not doing very much exploration. We're not doing very much combat. I usually like to weigh a little bit more in the exploration, but it is what it is. Then I really start to lose it, especially if it's social, as in player to player. If it's player to player, a lot of times we're not advancing things because ultimately the things that we're pushing, they're just not relevant to a whole lot that's going on in the world. These are things that, if we as players just have authority to handle mostly how our characters feel, how our characters are processing things, the choices that our characters make. this could be something that's a little bit more powerful in a game that has perhaps domain play and stuff like that, where maybe the characters have a lot of say so over a lot of things and they can assert very important things themselves that remain true to the world because of the influence that they hold. But if they're just kind of adventurers in an adventuring party, then a lot of times it's really not so much. It's really just like, well, we're all on a quest together. We're basically associates. And so there's just not a lot of stakes here in us just conversing with each other about our feelings and all that kind of stuff. So again, that's just something that really takes me out of it. So, really, what I wanted to present is my thesis statement, which is basically that if the players in the DM or the game master or the judge or the referee, whatever you want to call it, are cognizant of what everyone at the table finds interesting in play and acknowledges it and utilizes it, you can make it work. Even if you have people that have very different, distinct play styles and interests. And I have a few examples of when this has worked, when it's fallen flat, and stuff like that. So I ran a Chalt game using Dungeon Crawl Classics. Chalt is Vendor Satanis's Gonzo setting, and it's really cool. Basically, one of the things that was interesting about that game is the composition of the players. Some people don't know this. I'm sure a lot to do. I do a lot of old school games. I also do occasional modern games, and I started with 5e. So there are a lot of people that I play with that are new school, and there are a lot of people that I play with that are old school. Well, what happens when you put them together? Some may say bad things could happen. In this game, they didn't really. I mean, it was probably one of the best campaigns I've ever managed to run, and it probably would. I wouldn't say it probably would still be going, but the only thing that really stopped it was just a whole bunch of real world nonsense that just made it hard to keep going. But we had two old school players, and the two old school players were, I think, a little bit more in my sympathies as far as how we like to play. One of whom basically would often put things in terms of planning, and then whenever they were speaking in character, it would be because they're talking to an NPC. They're trying to get something done. You would have the other one was kind of in the same vein for the most part, but was a little bit more expressive, I would say, about what their character would say and things like that. And both of them were very obviously they're very respectful. And I think that's going to be the thing that's going to carry through here. Then we had a fifth edition player that had played a very short time of 5e, played with me in a previous game, had a really good time. And, we were just fast buds basically. And then we had a more experienced modern player. I'm pretty sure that this modern player had played 3.5 or fourth edition. I can't remember which, but had mostly played fifth edition, maybe played some other things on the side, and is just a very improv style gamer. Whereas the other 5e player was just like, didn't really speak in character that much unless they had to. It was really just kind of like chilling in the background, but was a huge chaotic person, just did crazy stuff all the time. So you put this group of players together, and you would think that that they might have some clashes. That the old school people might get upset whenever the more improv new school gamer is wanting to spend a lot of time talking, between the party members and stuff like that. That really didn't happen, and I think a lot of it is that Matt, who is the more experienced modern player, was there to make sure that everybody kind of got their thing. Because Matt was very cognizant of that kind of stuff. The old school players were cognizant that Matt really appreciated those moments that they were able to, just kind of do some improv role playing and stuff like that. And then, everybody was basically making things work for the chaotic player, even though we had actually technically a neutral cleric in the party, but still a cleric that definitely probably disapproved of a lot of stuff that the wizard was doing. They still found ways to make it so that Thoth was able to do his nonsense with just crazy stuff. I can't even get into it. Like bad crazy, heinous stuff. They made it all work. And a lot of it, I think, is just because respect and just being understanding of what everybody wants at the table. My old school essentials game. Now, my old school essentials game was a tough one because we didn't have regular groups. But one of the things that we tended to have, because everybody pretty much was either old school or they were like me, somebody who was newer school that went back to old school and was really interested in this manner of play. So almost everybody was down for either one of two things. One was players minimizing risks and lots of planning. And then the other one is meat grinders. Your character's dying like crazy. Now, people may already be guessing where I'm going with this. We did have some scuffles occasionally about players who were upset with the players that wanted to plan and take things very slowly. And then, of course, there is the whole thing about what if we disagree on our plans and we really think that this plan is the one we need to take because I don't want my character to die. I've been trying so hard to keep this character alive. What can you do? What can you do? A lot of it just, I think, hinges on respectful communication. What I ended up doing at the time, and sometimes I don't always do the best thing, is really just instituting a caller if necessary. If it came down to it, I'd institute a caller. Sometimes I just kind of let things settle, and I could tell some of the players got upset. So I think that in those situations, I could have done better. Instituting a caller is obviously one way to fix it, but really a lot of it, what I think could have fixed or made things better without me having to intervene, which the DM is responsible for doing that if it comes to it, is really just people respectfully communicating. Like, hey, guys, can we speed things up a little bit? I'm getting kind of bored with all the planning, all this kind of stuff. I'll take the risks. Maybe I'll try and do things that will take the risks. And if you want to hold back and see what happens to me, that's fine. I'll just roll a new character. I'm cool with that. A lot of times that didn't happen. It was, basically somebody getting upset for one reason or another, and it could have gone better. And again, respectful communication will go a heck of a long way, even whenever you have pretty profound disagreements. And in that style of play, it's not quite like some of the more new school games I've been in, that the worst that happens is that you're kind of bored through the session. In this case, the worst that happens is your character dies and many sessions of hard work go down the toilet. You're starting over. So that's just that was the thing that happened. Whenever you're talking about new school games. So new school games, you do have the improv players. I've already talked about one. What about the dreaded min-maxer? That's the thing that a lot of people really talk about, is the power gamer. I mean, there's a lot of videos about all kinds of other things as well. Well, I'm not going to shy away from saying that I have had a fair bit of min-maxers or power gamers at my table. And I don't hate them. I don't have any particular problem with them. The thing is that we don't exactly, they and I, we don't exactly see things the same as far as what we want to get from the game. I once saw things like they did, but my taste changed. That's not really me better, them worse, or them better, me worse. It's just different now. But where I think a lot of this, again, falls apart is that the dreaded min-maxer tends to do one of two things. Number one is they tend to ruffle the feathers because they make things trivial. And they can make things trivial by just blowing things away. A lot of times you hear about these, big fat damage builds that just blah, everything's dead. No problem, guys. We can move on. And so it removes the challenge for the other players. So that is one way that can happen. Or it can completely make things anticlimactic whenever the DM is trying to present challenging scenarios. And so it can ruffle the DM's feathers. It can make the DM want to say, well, I want to restrict this. I want to restrict that, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's just the way that the official content is made. There's a reason that I am restrictive when it comes to 5e stuff. And I'm sure that people are probably going like, well, 3.5, and, all kinds of other stuff. And yeah, this is not a 5e only issue. It's not. But that is one way that it happens, and another way is just whenever they use their power gaming abilities to spread versatility so much that the other characters just aren't really necessary as much. And this can get even worse if that player just dominates the game overall. If they just hog the attention, they just constantly talk and say, my character this, my character that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then a lot of times what can end up happening is the other players can just end up sitting in the background and listening because ultimately they're not needed anymore. And that can be an issue. That can really sour things, I think. Um, the thing that I think is important is that if stuff like that happens, then the important thing is to just have the conversation, the hard conversation to have. And that is to introduce constructive criticism to the culture of play at the table. I don't know that in the middle of play is necessarily the best way to do it. I guess it kind of depends on, is this like a one-time session? How long is it? All those kinds of things. Um, this is one of the reasons why I'm starting to think maybe I should give breaks every so often, maybe like a 15-minute break or something. I usually don't do that because usually we play for like 3 hours and everybody's like, well, just, do everything I need to before that. And then we'll just, plow through it. But a break can give people an opportunity to say, for me to say as the DM, how's it going so far? Is there anything that, you think could be done better? That kind of thing, and hopefully get some feedback. But it can be awkward to just say, well, I don't like the way that you're doing this. I don't like the way that this player is doing that, and all that kind of stuff. Then it might be a good time for people to try and posit things in a positive way rather than a negative way. And I know this is kind of getting into like psychology mumbo jumbo stuff, and I'm not a psychologist. But just rather than saying, for instance, hey man, your character is just like taking up all the spotlight, taking it, and you're taking up all the time and all that kind of stuff. Instead of presenting it in a negative way, suggesting, hey, I really would like for all of the characters and all the players to get an opportunity to do more because it really doesn't seem like, well, again, you might want to think about the phrasing for a little bit more than I'm thinking about whenever I'm doing this right now, because I'm not working off of a script. I just have some little keynotes. But just try and present it in a more positive way so that you're not ruffling feathers. You're not making people feel like they're ruining your night or anything like that. But just like, hey, I wish that there were more opportunities for this kind of thing. Or, me and in the romance game, for me to have just said to the other players, hey guys, this isn't really a mode of play I can engage with, and I don't really find terribly my speed. So if we could do some more of some other stuff too, I'd really like that. For the plot driven game, for me to say, I really would like for there to be a lot more moral conundrums that have big effects on the game world and stuff like that. Try and present those kinds of things rather than tearing down exactly what they're doing. Just perspective and tone it goes a long way. And I think that if you make that part of the culture of play, people start expecting that this is going to happen. And it's not that we hate the game and that we hate the players or anything like that, but that we want to try and make sure that everybody has as much of a good time as possible, and that nobody is ruining the experience for anybody else. Then maybe things will start flowing better, is kind of what I'm thinking. This is something I'm going to commit to. So if you are playing in any of my games, I'm sorry if I'm going to annoy you after the session or possibly in breaks by asking you those questions. Is there anything that we could do better? But it's going to happen. So it can be really hard to have those conversations. It can be a lot easier sometimes to just be passive and just endure whatever things that you're not appreciating. Especially if you just kind of like the feeling of hanging out with other people. And it can also be easy to just assume that you're the odd one out. I often assume that I'm the odd one out because I'm the guy who's the weird old school guy, who likes going in and falling in pit traps and dying and then rolling up a new character. When there are a lot of people that are like, that would be devastating. I don't want my character to die. It's tragic. Um, but I think it would make things better. So I guess key points. Don't be afraid to have the hard talks. Do it respectfully. Do it with love. Do it with kindness. I know it sounds hippie and everything, but I think it gets the point across. Um, don't let people run you over. Don't let people ruin your games. And if you're the DM, just check on everybody every now and then and see how they're liking things and if there's anything that you could do better. And I I just know that the times that I have spent enduring stuff I didn't like makes me really hope that there weren't people that were doing that at my tables, because I don't want that for them. I want them to have a great time. And sometimes people aren't going to be the right ones for your group, and that's just normal. That's okay. But if we can make adjustments and make it work, I think that is maybe the best thing to do. That's it for this video. I'm probably going to do a stream at some point to finish up the Swords and Wizardry magic section. And I've been reading a lot of Osric, and I really want to talk about it. And I also need to I'm also reading this, and which I know, like, it's like, Aaron, do you like just read a whole bunch of different things at a time? Yes, I do. I'll read a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and it's kind of ridiculous, and it's probably not very smart, especially if I'm going to do like in-depth things and might get game mechanics confused and things like that. But it's just how I work. I don't know. I guess I have ADHD. Y'all take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful remainder of your weekend, and see you later.